In January 2013, British Prime Minister David Cameron promised an in-out referendum on British membership of the European Union in 2017, after a period of renegotiation with the EU, if the Conservative Party wins an outright majority at the next general election, expected in 2015. Both Labour and the Liberal Democrats opposed the policy of guaranteeing a referendum in 2017, holding instead that a referendum should only be held if there is a further transfer of sovereignty to the European Union. Since 2010, polls have indicated that the UK public is divided on the question, with opposition peaking in November 2012 at 56% compared to 30% who want to remain, and support peaking in 2013. The largest ever poll showed the public to be split on the issue, with 41% in favour of withdrawal, 41% in favour of membership, and 18% undecided. However, when asked how they would vote if Britain renegotiates its terms with the EU, and the government says British interests are better protected, a wide majority of over 50% said they would vote to stay. While no state has ever withdrawn from the EU, Greenland, part of the Danish realm, voted to leave the EU's predecessor, the European Economic Community, in 1985, and Algeria left upon independence in 1962, having been a part of France until then. The first United Kingdom European Communities membership referendum, 1975, endorsed the continuation of the UK's membership. History. In January 2013, British Prime Minister David Cameron said that if elected in the 2015 general election, a Conservative government would negotiate new agreements with the European Union and would then hold a referendum on whether to remain in or to leave the EU. Political leaders in the EU criticised the possibility of British renegotiation of its membership of the Union and publicly supported Britain's continued membership. Public polls in France and Germany favoured a British exit. The Obama administration has warned against a British exit from the European Union, arguing that it would reduce the British voice in the EU, which was not in the USA's interest. Cameron had previously rejected a referendum on Britain's EU membership, but suggested the possibility of a future referendum to ensure the UK's position within an evolving EU has the full-hearted support of the British people. The Labour Party say they do not support a referendum at the current time, but have not ruled it out for the future. The Liberal Democrats have said they do not support an in-out referendum because it is within Britain's interests to remain a member. The UK Independence Party, the British National Party, the Green Party of England and Wales, and the Respect Party all support a referendum. Former Chancellor of the Exchequer and member of the House of Lords Nigel Lawson called for the UK to leave the EU in an article for The Times in May 2013. He said the move would be a wake-up call to businesses, and would allow great exporting opportunities to the developing world, especially Asia. Prime Minister David Cameron has been facing calls from backbenchers to hold a referendum on EU membership before the 2015 general election after the UK Independence Party's success in the 2013 county council elections. Private Members Bill. In May 2013, the Conservative Party published a draft EU referendum bill and outlined their plans for renegotiation and then an in-out vote if returned to office in 2015. The draft bill stated that the referendum must be held no later than December 31, 2017. The draft was taken forward as a private member's bill by Conservative MP James Wharton. The bill's first reading in the House of Commons was made on June 19, 2013. The Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, David Cameron, was said by a spokesman to be very pleased, and would ensure the bill was given the full support of the Conservative Party. Regarding the ability of the bill to force the next Parliament into holding a referendum, a parliamentary research paper has noted that, the bill simply provides for a referendum on continued EU membership by the end of December 2017 and does not otherwise specify the timing, other than requiring the Secretary of State to bring forward orders by the end of 2016. These orders would need both houses to agree to the detailed rules for the poll and the date. If no party obtained a majority at the next general election due in 2015, there might be some uncertainty about the passage of the orders in the next Parliament. Unless the orders are passed, it would not appear possible to hold the referendum, since the day and the conduct of the poll would not have received parliamentary assent. The bill received its second reading on July 5, 2013 by 304 vote to nil after almost all Labour MPs and all Liberal Democrat MPs abstained and finally cleared the Commons in November 2013. It was introduced to the House of Lords in December 2013, but failed to pass after the Lords voted to block the bill. Conservative Party MP, Bob Neill has promised to reintroduce the bill into the Commons after coming third in an annual ballot for private members' bills. If an identical bill is again passed by the Commons, the Lords will not be able to stop it coming into force under the Parliament Act. Television debates. In March and April 2014, two head-to-head debates between Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage on the issue of leaving the European Union were broadcast in the UK. High-profile interventions by two of the UK unregistered trademark's most prominent pro-EU and anti-EU figures ahead of the European Parliament election. The first hour-long debate, hosted by Nick Ferrari, was broadcast on radio station LBC on March 26, and was followed by the European Union, In or Out, televised live on BBC Two on April 2. Snap polls by YouGov and ICM suggested that Farage performed best in the debate, but the BBC's Nick Robinson suggested in his analysis, history will record that Nigel Farage was the winner of these debates. Nick Clegg will hope that, nevertheless, he may have won something too by being seen to challenge Britain's political insurgent. Procedure. No member state has ever left the European Union. The United Kingdom voted to remain a member of the European Communities in a 1975 referendum. 3 former territories of EU member states have withdrawn from the EU, Algeria, Greenland and St. Bartholomew copyright Lemmy, with the latter two becoming overseas countries and territories of the European Union. Before the Treaty of Lisbon entered into force on December 1, 2009, no provision in the treaties or law of the European Union outlined the ability of a member state to voluntarily withdraw from the EU. The treaty establishing a constitution for Europe provided that any member could voluntarily leave the Union of its own accord, but this treaty was never ratified. However, the voluntary withdrawal clause survived into the Lisbon Treaty as Article 50 TEU. This new provision formalized the procedure by stating that a member state may notify the European Council that it wishes to withdraw, upon which withdrawal negotiations begin. If no other agreement is reached, a treaty ceases to apply to the withdrawing state 2 years after such notification. The remaining members of the EU would also need to undertake negotiations to manage the changes to the EU's budgets, voting allocations and policies brought about by the withdrawal of a member state. Criticism of the proposal to withdraw: should the United Kingdom withdraw from the European Union but remain in the European Economic Area or the European Free Trade Area, Britain would have to continue implementing European Union law relevant to the internal market, but would no longer have the authority to influence its formation. The EEA agreement does not cover the following policy areas: common agriculture and fisheries policies, customs union, common trade policy, common foreign and security policy, direct and indirect taxation and justice and home affairs. Currently this is what is done by Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. Around 1.4 million British nationals had exercised their right to freedom of movement to live, work or study in the European Union according to the British government. British citizens are currently able to study in EEA countries at the same cost as charged to their own citizens. This arrangement applies equally between EU states. Were Britain to leave the European Union and the European Economic Area, British citizens would lose these rights. The status of the common travel area between a UK outside the EU and an Ireland continuing as a member remains to be clarified. According to the European Commission, the European single market brings between £30 billion to £90 billion into the British economy. It is unknown if Britain could negotiate a free trade agreement, although the EU does have free trade agreements with Algeria, Colombia, Egypt, Mexico, Peru, South Africa and Tunisia, amongst others. The European Trade Commissioner Carol de Gucht told the British Broadcasting Corporation that Europe is not a free lunch. However, the United Kingdom has a substantial trade deficit with the European Union. Some of those in favour of a British withdrawal say Britain could try to create a Commonwealth free trade area to make up money lost by leaving the single market. The idea of a series of bilateral free trade agreements, or even a full Commonwealth Free Trade Area was discussed at the 2005 Malta Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. It is often noted however that Britain trades more with Ireland than with all the leading developing countries combined, the so-called BRIC economics of Brazil, Russia, India and China. Some of those opposed to a British withdrawal note that the British economy is most similar to other European economies as opposed to those in other countries. Response: Business opinion. Car manufacturers Ford and BMW have warned Prime Minister David Cameron against an EU exit, insisting it would be devastating for the British economy. Business lobby group The British Chambers of Commerce found that just 18% of UK companies were in favour of entire withdrawal from the European Union. Of the 4,387 companies surveyed in February-March 2013, they found that 33% of businesses were in favour of withdrawal and negotiating a free trade deal, whilst 60% said a withdrawal could harm their business. A further 23% said that further integration would be beneficial for their company. International reaction: in response to David Cameron's January 2013 speech on the EU, several countries submitted their views on the proposal and on the UK-EU relationship. The US Obama administration expressed the belief that the United Kingdom is stronger in the European Union, and that the EU is stronger through having British membership. The German Defence Minister, Thomas de Maizière, claimed that it would diminish British influence in NATO. French President François Hollande, in a speech to the European Parliament, said there could be no à la carte option for European membership. In response to British Foreign Secretary William Hague's review of EU competences, the Japanese government said the government of Japan expects that the UK will maintain a strong voice and continue to play a major role in the EU. In July 2013, a letter from the Australian Foreign Minister Bob Carr said Australia recognises the UK's strength and resilience and looks forward to seeing it continue as a leading economy and effective power. Strong effective membership of the EU contributes to this. The Swedish Finance Minister, Anders Borg, expressed that this was a serious matter, and that for Sweden the issue raised some concerns and could reorient the EU. A report by Tim Oliver of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs noted that there has been little analysis of what a British withdrawal could mean for the EU. The report argues a UK withdrawal has the potential to fundamentally change the EU and European integration. On the one hand, a withdrawal could tip the EU towards protectionism, exacerbate existing division, or unleash centrifugal forces leading to the Euro unregistered trademark's unravelling. Alternatively, the EU could free itself of its most awkward member, making the EU easier to lead and more effective. Labour for a referendum. Labour for a referendum is a political campaign by members of the Labour Party that seeks a referendum in the United Kingdom on the European Union. The movement was set up following a pledge by the Conservative Party to hold an in-out vote if re-elected in 2015. Let Britain Decide is a political campaign by the Conservative Party that seeks a referendum on the UK's relationship with the European Union. It was set up in June 2013 by party chairman Grant Shapps MP. The movement aims to force an in-out vote commitment on EU membership from all three major parties. Exit plan competition. Following David Cameron's announcement of an EU referendum, British think tank the Institute of Economic Affairs announced in July 2013 a competition to find the best plan for a UK exit from the European Union, declaring that a departure is a real possibility after the next election. Those interested were asked to submit a 2,000-word proposal by September 16, 2013, with around 20 of the best being asked to produce a more detailed version. 8 judges, including former Chancellor of the Exchequer Nigel Lawson, determined which entry is the most plausible. The winning entry was awarded €100,000, and was announced on April 8, 2014. Ian Mansfield submitted the winning proposal in the competition with a submission focusing on addressing both trade and regulatory issues with EU members as well as other UK global trading partners. The 6 finalists for the Brexit Prize had been announced on March 26, 2014. They were Rory Broomfield and Ian Murray, Professor Stephen Bush, Benna Clements, Tim Hewish, Ian Mansfield, and Daniel Peacock. Opinion polling, renegotiated terms. The proposed referendum discussed in this article would be on the basis of a prior renegotiation by the British government of his relationship with Europe. The first tables below show polling when the question is asked on this basis. 2014, 2013, standard polling on EU membership. The tables below show polling on whether the UK should be in or out of the EU. It does not ask the question in the context of the proposed prior renegotiation. 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011, 2010, other opinion polling, on UK withdrawal, Scotland. A Euro poll conducted by Ipsos Mori in February 2013 shows that a majority of Scots would opt for the UK to stay in the EU. 53% say they would vote to remain, whereas 34% said they would vote to leave. However, over half of Scots believe there should be a referendum on the UK's continued membership of the EU. Valencia Euro poll conducted by Wales Online in June 2013 found that 37% of people in Wales would opt to withdraw from the European Union, whereas 29% said they would vote to stay in. More than 1 in 5 said they would not vote, with 14% saying they don't know how they would vote. Of the 1,015 people surveyed between 14th and 25th June, the poll found that support for leaving was greatest in the South Wales Valleys, and fewest in South West Wales. The only age group to show a majority of those wishing to stay in were between 18 and 25. France. A Euro poll conducted by French daily newspaper Le Parisien found that 52% of French voters were in favour of the UK withdrawing from the EU. Of the 1,136 people polled, in conjunction with French research agency BVA in January 2013, 48% said they would rather the UK remained inside the EU. Germania. A Euro study carried out by International Politique found 64% of Germans favoured Britain remaining inside the EU, with just 36% saying they favoured an exit. The biggest support for retaining the union with the UK was with the younger generation, with 69% of 18 to 25-year-olds saying they wanted the UK to stay. Amongst the German political parties, the Green Party remained most favourable at 85%. Ireland. Ireland remains largely opposed to a British exit from the EU. On the possible withdrawal of other countries, Dean Merker. A Euro poll commissioned in January 2013 following David Cameron's EU referendum speech found that 52% of Danes would still want their country to stay within the EU even if the UK opted to withdraw. However, 47% said they would like the government to attempt to renegotiate the terms of their membership. Ireland. A Red Sea poll, commissioned by European Movement Ireland in January 2013, found most Irish people would opt for Ireland to remain inside the EU. 66% even if the UK decided to leave. Just 29% of those asked said that Ireland should leave if the UK does. Previous campaigns to hold a referendum on EU membership. 2010 campaign by Nikki Sinclair. In July 2010, Nikki Sinclair launched a campaign for a referendum with the aim of collecting 100,000 signatures calling for a referendum on the UK's continued membership in the European Union. The campaign's first roadshow was held in Stoke-on-Trent on July 29, 2010, and it visited over 50 towns and cities in the West Midlands. Alongside her weekly roadshows, she created a magazine which by April 2012 was in its 4th issue. The magazine has gathered cross-party support. As of August 2011, the petition had attracted over 100,000 signatures. An electronic petition, set up by the Daily Express, attracted more than 59,000 signatures from its creation in August 2011 to its end in August 2012. See also, Budget of the European Union, Danish Euroscepticism, People's Pledge, Referendums in the United Kingdom, Scottish Independence Referendum, 2014. Secession, UK Independence Party, UK Rebate, United Kingdom European Communities Membership Referendum, 1975, References.